Hey guys, Hailey Lain, aka Key Black here, and welcome back to another episode of Off the Cuff. I'm gonna jump right back into talking about the Yu-Gi-Oh! Chapters after I left off on the Man from Egypt arc, and this leaves us at chapter 15 of the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga. So previously, on Yu-Gi-Oh!, we met the Man from Egypt himself, Shadi, who carries the Millennium Scales and the Millennium Key. This chapter starts off where Yugi is wondering about the puzzle for one of the first times again since the first chapter. He's thinking over the words that Shadi left him with, which were to seek his other self, and it looks like he's finally taking the idea that the puzzle might be incredibly cursed seriously. Grandpa interrupts his train of thoughts, however, and reveals that the TV is now reporting the untimely sudden death of Kanekura, who appears to have died from a heart attack. There's no evidence of any wrongdoing. And of course, the topic of mummies' curses is now in the air, and so Jinochi and Anzu show up, they've heard the news as well, and the whole gang decides to go visit Professor Yoshimori at the university. And throughout this, Yugi is getting these recurring bad feelings about what's to come. Somehow he feels like he has to go see Professor Yoshimori, but he doesn't want his friends to go, and he can't explain why. And throughout all of this, we're getting these periodic moody shots of the sky and these strange cloud formations that seem to be kind of unnatural, especially with all the pacing. Then we get a look at Yoshimori as he's, sitting alone with his thoughts, and we get to see, without any words, this beautiful panel sequence of everything that he's thinking about, from discovery of the tomb to the genuine excitement at having found this amazing discovery to Kanekura's death, and the good professor is very jumpy and very much on edge after that horrible news. And as always, the panel sequences here are beautiful. Takahashi really knows how to control the tone and the pacing of a story to really get you on edge. Like, it's actually really scary reading this sequence. And so when Shadi finally emerges from the darkness behind Professor Yoshimori, you already know, oh man, he's gonna be here to make good on his promise to kill the other person who defiled the tomb. However, as he enters the soul room of Professor Yoshimori, he notices in the corner that Yoshimori is expecting none other than Yugi Muto, the strange little Japanese boy who solved the puzzle, and to whom he lost a game he never expected to even be playing with him. Shadi gets the idea to use Professor Yoshimori as a puppet to draw out the other Yugi, and so when Yugi and his friends arrive, and there's this very wholesome kind of sequence where Yugi's interacting with his buds, we get this delicious whiplash in tone of the gang's all cheery, they're gonna make sure to put a smile on Yoshimori's face. Yoshimori's already smiling. The gang only has just enough time to realize that there is something very wrong with Professor Yoshimori before he suddenly attacks Jinochi and tries to choke him out. Shadi reveals himself to Yugi, and once again, Yugi is the only person in the room who could see him, and Shadi demands to see the other Yugi once more, because he wants a rematch. I have to appreciate the way that Takahashi draws the professor in his possessed state here. Like, I don't even know if I can call these expressions. It looks like there's nothing going on upstairs in a really bad way. Like, I haven't seen any other comics achieve this level of creepy before, and I certainly hadn't when I first read this thing. Like, I want to underscore, none of this happens in the anime. I had no idea Shadi could do this to a person, but he's going whole hog. Anzu decides to be a total badass and knocks Professor Yoshimori out with a globe that she finds in a corner, takes Shadi a little bit off guard a little bit, but it's not enough, and Yugi is then faced with Shadi deciding to sick his powers on Anzu. Clearly, using the professor wasn't enough, and while Jinochi decides to be a hero to lead Professor Yoshimori away from his buddies and make sure that they're safe from whatever the heck this guy's gonna do now that he's, zombified? He has no idea. And I do love this wild goose chase that Jinochi leads Professor Yoshimori on. Like, the panels in it still stick in my brain to this day, even before going back to reread this. Shadi reveals to Yugi that he has set a trigger word for Anzu to die on command. And finally, the other Yugi goes, "That's it," and he comes out in the coolest panel sequence. When I read this as a kid, I thought that this sequence was the coolest shit I had ever read, and I still do. There's this gorgeous 2-page spread of all these vertical panels, and I love when Takahashi does these full horizontal, full vertical panels. We got the heartbeat rhythm before. This one feels like a drum beat. We can feel each bass hit as we get each shot of Yugi looking shocked. We get the puzzle glowing and gleaming, and we get this gorgeous fade implication of a change in posture between the two Yugis, and then finally, ba-bam! Shadi! The other Yugi is finally here, and he is not happy. And now that he has revealed himself, Shadi says the game can begin. There is just so much to talk about with the art in these two chapters and the way that Takahashi sets up the anticipation and the payoff for this genuinely horrific setting. In shots where the characters are just standing there and like shouting at each other or just talking to each other, he somehow makes it the most dynamic thing I've ever read. It's in everything, from the postures to the expressions to the framing to the use of speed lines and halftones. Like when we get the first look at Anzu after she's been turned into a marionette, we get this really unnerving close-up of her, and it's just like, she's not there. And so on the reread, I'm as tense as Yugi is. Like, it feels like he's really in over his head. So far, the only character that we had seen being able to do the kinds of things that the other Yugi does was the other Yugi, and now Shadi seems very, very capable and far more malicious than any of the other villains that we've encountered so far. And yet he's following his own brand of justice that you can't really argue with based on his own logic. And he also seems to be very well aware that what he's doing is really, really harsh. Like, he has this great moment. I have to laugh at this. In the official translation of the manga, he comments that, Anzu seems pretty easy to like. He pities her, but the marionette design must continue, or something like that. I learned from Jess that this is actually an inaccurate translation, and what he's actually saying in the original manga is much closer to, this girl is amiable and innocent. Can I bring myself to remodel this room? It would be a pathetic thing to do, but I must force that boy into action. Which somehow makes Shadi way scarier than either the anime version or the official translation of the manga version of him. So he's shaping up to be a really formidable villain here, and I am just super excited on the reread to see what I missed the first time. So guys, that's gonna do it for this episode. Thanks so much for listening and for watching, and I will see you in the next one as we pick up the end of this saga. Thanks again!